Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Burn the house down. Did you hear what happened to the old house on Birch Street? No? What? It burned down. Burned down? How? Nobody knows for sure. People are saying it was arson. Arson? That place was empty for years. Who would bother? That's what everyone's asking. But there were lights on the night before. Lights? You're serious? As a heart attack. I saw it myself. You were there? Well, I was passing by, took a shortcut through the park. And you didn't think to tell anyone. I didn't think it mattered. Thought maybe the city finally sent someone to clear it out. The city? They don't even fix the street lights. Why would they bother with that house? You're probably right. But who else would be in there? Kids, maybe? You know, messing around. That's what I thought at first. But what? I saw someone. Someone? Yes, a man. Or at least, I think it was a man. You think? What does that mean? It was dark, okay? I couldn't see clearly. But there was someone moving around inside. Did they see you? No. At least, I don't think so. I kept my distance. What were they doing? It looked like they were carrying something. A bag, maybe. A bag? Like a duffel bag? Could have been. Hard to tell from where I was. And then they disappeared. Into the back of the house. That's weird. You didn't hear anything? No. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Did you notice anything else? There was a smell. A smell? Like gasoline. Gasoline? Are you kidding me? No, I swear. I didn't think much of it at the time. How could you not? Gasoline in an old house? That's a red flag. I know that now, okay? But at the time, I just thought it was, I don't know, maybe they were fixing something. Fixing something? In that house? I wasn't thinking clearly. So what did you do after that? I kept walking. You just left? Yeah, and you didn't tell anyone? Who was I supposed to tell? The cops? They wouldn't believe me. Maybe they would have, after it burned down. Look, I didn't know it was gonna burn down. Still, this is bad. I know it is. That's why I've been freaking out. Does anyone else know you were there? No? Not yet, anyway. You sure about that? Yeah. What if someone saw you? Nobody saw me. You can't be certain. I'm telling you, I was careful. But if they find out, they won't. You're awfully confident for someone who's in the middle of this mess. What mess? I didn't do anything. You were there. That's enough to make it messy. So what are you saying? I'm saying you better figure out what you're gonna do if someone starts asking questions. Like who? The cops, for starters. Why would they come to me? I don't know. Maybe they've got cameras or something. Cameras? At that old place? Or nearby? Someone could have seen you. You're just trying to scare me. No. I'm trying to make you think. I am thinking. And I think you're overreacting. Am I? Yeah. Nobody cares about me walking past some abandoned house. Maybe. But what if they find out about the gasoline? What about it? I didn't put it there. Doesn't matter. You were there, you smelled it, and you didn't report it. So what? Is that a crime? Maybe not, but it sure makes you look bad. This is insane. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not saying you did. I'm just saying you're connected now. Connected how? By walking through the park? By seeing something? Fine. Let's say the cops come. What am I supposed to tell them? The truth. The truth? Yeah. You walked by, saw lights, smelled gasoline, and kept going. And you think that's gonna make me look less suspicious? Better than lying. I don't know. This feels all wrong. What's your alternative? I don't know. Maybe just keep quiet? Bad idea. Why? Because secrets have a way of coming out. You don't understand. If I say something, they might think I was involved. Not saying anything makes you look more involved. This is a nightmare. It's not that bad. Not that bad? You just said, I'm connected to a house that burned down. Look, you're not the one who set it on fire, but they don't know that. Then, make them know. How? By being honest. Honest? With cops? That's a joke. You got a better plan? No. Then maybe stop freaking out and just deal with it. Easy for you to say. You weren't there, and I'm trying to keep you from making it worse. Fine. Let's say I tell them. Then what? Then you answer their questions and move on. Just like that? Yeah. You don't think they'll dig deeper? Into what? You didn't do anything. I don't know. What if there's more to this? Like what? Like, what if that guy I saw was the one who started the fire? Then it's even more important that you say something. You're not getting it. What if he saw me? Okay, let's think this through. There's nothing to think about. If he saw me, I'm screwed. Not necessarily. How do you figure? He doesn't know who you are. What if he does? How? Did you talk to him? No. Then relax. Relax? Are you serious? Yes. You're overthinking this. Overthinking? Someone torched a house, and I was there. You weren't in the house. But I saw him, and he didn't see you. You don't know that? If he did, don't you think he would have come after you? Maybe. Or maybe he's waiting. For what? I don't know. To make sure I don't talk. You're spiraling. Am I? What if this guy's dangerous? He might be. All the more reason to go to the cops. I can't. Why not? Because if I talk, and he finds out, you're making this bigger than it is. Am I? Yeah. I don't think you get how serious this is. I do. And that's why you need to stop hiding. I can't. You can. No, I can't. What if... Stop. Listen to yourself. What? You're working yourself up over nothing. Nothing? Yeah. You think this is nothing? Compared to what it could be? Yeah. What does that mean? It means you're not the one who burned the house down. And that's all that matters. I wish I could believe that. You should. I don't know. Then figure it out fast, because this isn't going away. What do you mean? Sooner or later, someone's gonna come knocking. And when they do, be ready. I hope you're right. I am. You better be. I am. The whisper in the city. The dark skeletons of skyscrapers stretched into the twilight sky. I trudged along an empty street, my feet dragging through the damp sand, leaving deep grooves behind me. How long had I been here? I couldn't tell. The overcast horizon was slowly growing lighter, the mist thinning with each passing moment. The street seemed familiar to me, but any landmarks that might have been here before were completely effaced now. Everything around me was falling apart, disintegrating into sand that covered every inch of the ground. Suddenly, a soft, faint whisper came from somewhere in the distance. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen anyone else in this desolate place, so I shuffled toward the sound. The voice came again, this time a little closer and more insistent, but I still couldn't make out the words or pinpoint where it was coming from. I tried to pick up my pace, but the sand was dense and viscous between my toes. The whisper kept calling, getting clearer, as though someone was tuning a radio. It was soothing, but firm. I sensed it wished me no harm, at least as long as I did what it told me to. Finally, I understood what it was saying. "Come on, just a little bit further," the voice urged. It seemed like it was coming from a building to my right. I stared into the shadows in the gaping doorway that led into a dark hall. Nobody was there. I caught a reflection in one of the grimy shards of glass jutting from a window frame. Was it me? It couldn't be. How could I be this old and shriveled? I turned away and wandered toward the low horizon. "We need to get ready. Somebody is coming," the voice called from up ahead. A warm rain suddenly began to fall. It frothed in my hair and trickled down my cheeks. The air filled with a strange scent, something fresh and sweet. It didn't seem right. Rain shouldn't smell like that. The voice kept coaxing me forward, and I kept on wading through fragrant sheets of rain, my feet squelching in the soggy sand. After a while, the rain stopped, and the sky cleared a little, though the sun was still hidden behind the thick veil of clouds. The lukewarm mist curled around every turn, filling the streets that branched out from the crossroads I passed. If only it were clear enough to see what lay in the distance. Maybe then I could remember. Just as I reached the next junction, the whisper gave me a new command. "All right, let's get something to eat. Come on now. Turn here." I looked from side to side. Across the road to my left stood the remains of a diner. I plodded toward the building through the endless sand. I thought there couldn't possibly be anything to eat here, but as I stumbled over the threshold, I caught a whiff of toast and coffee. The diner was as decayed as everything else in this city. There was less sand inside than on the street, but it still covered the floor with an even layer. The display counter stood empty, the glass shattered. Here and there, overturned furniture lay scattered across the ground. The upholstery on the chairs and benches had rotted away a long time ago. The cup-shaped clock on the wall was missing its hands. Decay, dust, and sand. There was no one inside. Still, I heard muted whispers coming from every corner, buzzing like cicadas on a summer night. I moved through the room, trying to make out what the voices were saying, but there were just too many of them now. I shuffled through the jumbled chairs and tables to the center of the room. Here, on one of the tables, sat a plate of food and a cup of coffee. My stomach rumbled. There were no utensils, so I grabbed the food with my hands, stuffing it into my mouth. The toast was crunchy on the outside and soft on the inside. The omelet was fluffy and creamy. The coffee was strong and sweet. How long had it been since I had last eaten anything? I wasn't sure. It felt like ages. Suddenly, the air around me shimmered as though in a heat haze. The dilapidated diner faded away, and I found myself in a warm, sunlit kitchen. Light wood furniture, a crisp tablecloth, plates with delicate flower patterns on the rim. A woman stood in front of the stove. Her hair fell in neat waves, and she wore a light blue fit and flare dress. She turned to me and smiled. "Georgie, would you like another piece of toast?" she asked. Was she talking to me? Was that my name? I wanted to ask her what was going on, but before I could find the words, the mirage disappeared. I was back in the decaying diner, an empty plate before me. "Okay, George, you're done? Let's go now," the whisper cooed. I followed the voice back into the street. It kept urging me forward with its bright, incessant tone. Well, at least now I knew my name. But all the other questions still whirled in my head. What did the voice want from me? Where was I going? How long had I been here? Who was I? Really, it felt like this mess in my head would boil over, washing away all this dirty sand and all the debris of this dead city. I gritted my teeth, clenched my fists, and plowed forward. At last, the road led me to a park. Patches of grass poked through the sand. The trees, covered in yellow and red leaves, peeked through the fog, taunting me. A path lined with benches led into the mist. All right, let's sit down here. I settled onto the nearest bench. Quiet fragments of music fluttered to me from somewhere far away. The sound was comforting, familiar. The voice hummed around me for a moment before fading into the background. The music grew louder and steadier. I thought I recognized the melody, but couldn't quite put my finger on it. It reminded me of someone I used to miss. I sat alone, enveloped by the soothing blanket of music, staring at the colorful trees before me. Bit by bit, my angst and frustration melted away. After a while, I heard the whispers again. The voice that had been guiding me was talking to somebody else now. The new voice seemed familiar, like I'd heard it sometime long ago, in another life. I felt a movement in the air beside me. Someone touched my hand. "Dad? Dad, it's me." "Chad." The small room was tidy and clean, as nice as a room in such a facility could be. The curtains were open, and you could see a small park, colored in gold and red by the approaching cold. An old jazz standard was flowing from the player in the corner. A woman sat on a stool beside an armchair, where an old, frail man rested. She held his hand. "I'm sorry, Miss Ross. He's not having a good day today," a nurse said gently from behind the armchair. To be honest, they're few and far between now, and it's hard to say how many more he'll have. I know, but it's still so hard. It's like he's wandering further and further away, the woman said, wiping the corner of her eye. Dad, it's Katie. I'm here. His dry, thin fingers tightened around hers. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to do it. The words echoed in my mind as I stood there in the dark, my hands shaking, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the sound of the storm outside. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain hammered against the windows. It was a night that felt like it was made for horrors. But the real terror, my terror, was already inside. I stared down at his body, lying in a pool of crimson that seemed to stretch out, devouring everything it touched. His once bright eyes, filled with laughter and warmth, were now dull and empty. His chest was still, the rhythmic rise and fall I had come to know so well, now forever silenced. It wasn't supposed to end like this. We weren't supposed to be here. I never meant for any of it to happen. The night had started out differently. We were celebrating. Well, I thought we were. It had been a long week for both of us. John had been working late at the office, and I'd been buried in a dozen little tasks at home. We barely saw each other, only passing like two ships in the night. So, when he suggested dinner out, I'd jumped at the chance to spend some quality time together. We went to that little Italian restaurant we loved, the one tucked away in the corner of the city, with the flickering candles and soft music. Everything felt just right. The kind of evening that reminded me of why we had fallen in love in the first place. However, as the night wore on, something changed. Something was off. Something I couldn't explain. It started when John leaned in and rested his hand on mine across the table. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes I couldn't figure out. Was it uncertainty? Maybe it was just me. I hadn't been sleeping well at all. We had building tension between us for months. First, it was little things that were simple to overlook. But now, they were impossible to ignore. "What's on your mind?" I asked, trying to smile back. John sighed and leaned back in his chair, looking down at his plate for a moment before meeting my gaze again. "It's nothing, really. Just work stuff. You know how it is." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed him. I never did. When John didn't want to talk about something, he wouldn't. But then, as we left the restaurant, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. I couldn't help but smile, hoping that maybe he was attempting to rekindle the spark we'd once had. He'd always been good at that, surprising me and keeping the romance alive in his own way. "What's this?" I asked, teasing him as I took the box from his hand. "Just a little something," he said, his voice sounding odd. I opened it, and inside was a ring. But it wasn't a shiny, sparkly diamond ring that you'd expect as a romantic gesture. This ring was old and looked like perhaps it had been passed down through generations. The ring was tarnished, and the stone had a crack in it. "It's beautiful," I said, though I wasn't sure what I meant by that. There was something that didn't sit right in my gut. "Do you like it?" he asked. I nodded, but found it difficult to smile genuinely. I felt chills all over. "Where did you get this?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Something felt wrong. John didn't answer right away. His eyes had shifted, almost like he was hiding something. He looked away before attempting to look at me again. "It's been in the family for years. It's special. I thought you would like it." "Special," I echoed. My fingers traced the ring's surface, and it was cold, even colder than metal typically is. I could feel the tension between us. It wasn't just about the ring. It was deeper than that. Something had been building for a long time. John as acting odd, avoiding my eyes, trembling as he reached for the car keys. But we didn't say anything more on the drive home. It was quiet, other than the rain that had started. Everything was blurred by the water running down the windshield. The wipers were thankfully filling our silence. When we arrived home, we went through our routine of getting ready for bed. John took a long shower while I tried to relax in the living room. But my mind wouldn't shut off. I kept thinking about the ring, about the way it felt in my hands, and John's strange behavior. When John finally came out of the shower, he walked past me without saying a word, heading toward the bedroom. "John, wait," I said, my voice shaking. "Is something going on? Something you're not telling me?" He stood at the bedroom door and turned to me. He stared for a moment, with just a blank expression. Then he sighed and walked toward me. He sat down on the couch next to me. "I've been thinking a lot," he began with a low voice. "About us. About everything." My heart thudded loudly as I waited for him to continue. "I think we're drifting, Sarah," he said, his words immediately taking my breath away. "I just don't know if we can fix this anymore. We've been drifting for months. It felt like the world was tilting. I couldn't breathe. "Drifting?" I whispered. "What do you mean? We're fine. We're busy. We're just busy. That's all. We can fix this and make it work." John shook his head. "I'm not sure anymore. We've both been pretending. We're just not the same people we were when we got married, Sarah. I'm tired. Really tired. I don't think I can keep pretending." I wanted to cry, to scream, but I couldn't. All I could to do was sit there, trying to figure out what he meant. None of it made sense. I'd been trying so hard to hold everything together, and now it felt like It was slipping through my grasp. Before I could say anything, he stood up and went to the bedroom. I heard the rustle of sheets and the soft thud of him getting into bed. I didn't know what to do or say. I sat there for a long time, what felt like hours. The silence was killing me. Finally, I was unable to stand the distance between us any longer, so I went to the bedroom and stood in the doorway. John was lying on his side, with his back facing me. I couldn't see his face, but I felt the coldness coming from him. "John," I whispered. He didn't respond. "I can't lose you," I said, my voice cracking. "Please don't give up. We can work through this. I'll do anything." Still, there was no answer. Something inside me snapped. I was frustrated and scared of losing him. I didn't know what came over me, but I crossed the bedroom, grabbed the ring from the nightstand, and chucked it across the room. The silence was broken by the ring hitting the wall. "Do you really think this is going to fix everything?" I shouted. "This stupid ring? A symbol of what? The lies we've been telling each other?" Finally, John turned to face me, his eyes wide. Was he angry? Scared? But before he could say anything, I saw it, something sharp and dangerous glinting in his hand. He had a knife. I didn't see the motion coming. 1 minute, I was standing there, shouting at him. And the next, I felt the cold metal press into my side. It wasn't deep, but it stopped me in my tracks, clutching my wound. "John," I whispered, my voice trembling with disbelief. "What are you?" But he didn't answer. He didn't move. I was frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. My breath came in shallow gasps. In a panic, I grabbed at the knife, trying to push it away. I stumbled back, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what happened. Then, in a blur of motion, I grabbed the nearest thing I could get, a heavy glass vase, and swung it at him. It hit him in the face, and he staggered backward, the knife slipping from his hand. But it wasn't enough to stop him. He lunged toward me, and I fought back with everything I had. My mind was full of fear, confusion, and anger. I didn't know what I was doing anymore, or how it happened. All I knew was I needed to protect myself. The next thing I knew, John was on the floor. His body was crumpled, his unblinking wide eyes staring up at me. His chest no longer rose and fell. I didn't mean to do it. Nature or nurture? Sensitive content, serial killers. Nature or nurture? That is the question. Before today, I thought I knew where I stood on the issue. But now, friends, I am not really sure what to think. To give you context, a few weeks ago, after Mother passed, I was finally able to clean out her bedroom. The medical equipment was, of course, quite pristine, but the smell and debris from her glacial demise was simply overwhelming, and it took me days to clear paths in the room. I found the letters in her closet. Even now, it takes me a moment to adjust myself to the mental impact of those pages and pages of her precise Palmer script, describing in the most flowery of language a lifetime of barely requited love. The only mention of me in any of the letters was it, as in, I can get rid of it. My cold, sterile, demanding mother spent decades writing the most passionate and absolutely painful to read, lurid letters to her one-time lover who never once responded. The wrinkled envelopes I found in an old Avon perfume box, each bearing a scarlet ink, "Return to sender," returned from the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it just preyed on my mind, and I could not get the thoughts out of my head until I took action. Perhaps you may relate to this, perhaps not. So, friends, I eventually found myself in somewhat of a fugue state, an hour into the 2-hour drive up north from Dallas on 75 to US 69, which leads to Penitentiary Street, and then to the Big Mac, a maximum security prison once known for its annual prisoner rodeo, now infamous for its terrible conditions, riots, and death row prisoners, one of whom could be my father. To visit anyone at the Big Mac takes some time. Visiting someone like Louis Landry Reese takes time, and one's absolute forbearance for the most intimately probing of questions and fingers. It wouldn't surprise me if you hadn't heard of Louis Landry Reese and his swath of known and unknown rapes, kidnappings, and killings. But you will be able to find all you want with a few searches. Maybe you know exactly who he is. Driving under the peeling, white-arched grille Oklahoma State Penitentiary sign, buttressed by decaying, similarly painted white bricks pillars, I pulled into one of the few designated parking spots for Big Mac visitors. I turned off the Volvo's engine and sat for a moment, perhaps a bit longer than a moment, with my mind ticking to different thoughts about how maybe today I would finally learn who my father really was, about how Mother would never talk about him, about how she would punish me when I kept asking and asking, and about how Brandy, my old receptionist, would tease me about Volvos being only for short-haired women who shopped at Home Depot. After a bit, the rising sun. Visitors to the Big Mac must arrive very early. Warmed up the air in the car to the point my face began prickling with sweat, and I was brought back from my reminiscing. I opened the door, swung my legs out, and made my way to enter the prison. As I mentioned, the passage from our daily world to that of people such as Louis Landry Reese is rife with probing exams, delays, and grunting guards who entertain themselves with snickering under the breath asides. In the Shawshankian depths of the Big Mac, the black and blue rayon bulk that was my escorting guard halted at metal door, exactly like the dozen we had already passed. He turned back toward me and asked without much concern, "Are you sure?" It is true, friends. I am not a physically intimidating person. Not tall, not wide, not much hair, nor chin. With my decidedly pointed nose and very small teeth, Mother thought it the height of ironic hilarity that I chose the dental profession. A squealing mouse is what she called me, although, to be fair, I learned at a very young age that squealing, no matter how much pain or discomfort, only prolonged such experiences. So squealing is something I have not done in a very long time. I stood straight and focused on how I was a respected professional, how I would be walking out of this dank hellhole of sweating brick and would never ever return, while Louis Landry Reese would only leave feet first. How I would finally find out the truth. "Open the door," I whispered. Greasy tendrils of hair leaked from his scalp, down his shiny face onto pale, meaty forearms, creating a tangled and ripped curtain through which I could see a silver blue eye cutting from me to the closing door of the room and back to me. As the door shut, he lifted his head up, and I was absolutely shocked to see his sunken and caved face with a navel of puckered mouth. Louis Landry Reese had no teeth, literally. Then I heard the strangest sound, like a dog choking and barking at the same time. It was me, laughing hysterically. Louis Landry Reese did not appreciate my levity. Friends, not at all. He tried to stand, but the chains around his wrist went through a steel loop, bolted to the table, kept him stooped over as he shouted at me. The harsh ratcheting sound of the chains sawing back and forth through the loop assaulted my ears almost as much as his gummy-mouthed curses. The whole episode lasted only a few moments before a phalanx of guards rushed into the room, with one picking me physically up and setting me outside. To be frank, I do not really remember much too clearly from that point. I numbly followed the uniform in front of me and fuzzily collected my belongings before staggering into the Oklahoma sun. I made my way to the Volvo and began the drive back to Dallas. The shrieked words of my father still ricocheting between my ears, and he was indeed my father. One look at his face and those colorless, watery blue eyes that were identical to my own left no doubt, at least to me. I think Louis Landry Reese thought so too, even though he screamed the most terrible things about Mother and how I was just a dentist and not like the others, which is why I was so stunned and really driving on remote control until I got back to Dallas and pulled off Harry Hines into my driveway. The implications of Louis Landry Reese knowing my occupation meant he knew of me. But what did he know about me? I was thinking this over as I went to the basement to to check on Brandy. She had finally stopped trying to pull her wrists from the restraints, but it seemed she had really stopped doing much of anything. Even when I clicked the pliers together, she barely trembled. That was disappointing. But since Brandy was down to her last 3 teeth, 16, 24, and 41, it was probably time to discharge her and find my next patient. I tell you all this, friends, because contrary to the rantings of Louis Landry Reese, I am not just a dentist. I am the dentist. And Louis Landry Reese also said the others. So, I am posting my story on this dark website as a message in the bottle to see if maybe I have family, others like me, to ask, what do you think? Nature or nurture? Veil of night. I've said too much, Caroline exclaimed. She snatched her rain-soaked black denim jacket from the chair and turned to go. Caroline, wait! Hank caught her hand. Her slender fingers felt chill and damp against his. You can't expect me to believe. No, she murmured. No one would. And that's the point. It was useless even coming here. I don't know why I did. Hank squeezed her limp fingers, giving them a shake. Please, let's start over, he said, motioning for her to sit again. This cult, it's a coven. The Sisterhood of Unhallowed Light. She fidgeted with a lock of damp, auburn hair stuck to her pale forehead. Right, the sisterhood. So, a few women who get together and play at witchcraft? There are 12. They wanted me to join, and I thought I wanted that too. But Caroline caught her bottom lip between her teeth. The midnight hue of her black lipstick was a stark contrast to the pallor of her skin. She took a breath, and the words tumbled from her. I feel seen by them, like they really get me. They accept me. They celebrate me, just as I am. And what they offer, the sense of belonging, the knowledge, power. I thought, why shouldn't I? A flash of lightning lit the rain-spattered window, with a crack of thunder following close behind. Caroline's eyes grew large with panic, and she twisted in her seat to look outside. There are things we shouldn't play with, she whimpered. I know that now. I've completed 2 of the 3 initiation rituals with the Sisterhood. And you're saying this torrential rain we've been having these past 3 days is part of that? That's awfully biblical, isn't it? This isn't hurricane season, Hank. He shrugged and twisted his mouth in a half-ways grin. With weather patterns these days, who can tell what season it is anymore? It was me. It was the Sisterhood. It's part of the ritual, part of the summoning. Coincidence, that's all. She clutched his arm where the sleeve of his t-shirt ended, digging her cold, clammy fingers into his bicep, and pleaded. You wouldn't say that if you knew what I've done, what I've gone through to make this happen. Caroline, she let go of Hank's arm and fumbled with the top buttons of her black shirt. Yanking one half of it to her left side, she exposed part of her chest. A long vertical slash was bisected by a shorter one, forming an inverted cross over her heart. The two slashes stood out as angry purplish-red marks on her otherwise smooth, pale flesh, and were knitted together with black stitches. They made me promise my heart to Valthus, the formless entity of writhing darkness whom they worship. Hank stared for a moment, then sputtered. Valthus? Your heart? Come on, Caroline. What? Am I supposed to believe they've cut out your heart? Isn't it usually the soul these sort of fanatics are after? Caroline grasped Hank's fingers in her trembling hand and placed his palm over the wound on her chest. Her skin was unnaturally cool. He held his hand there for a moment, then brought his fingers up to her throat, feeling for a pulse. Another clap of thunder startled them both. Hank pulled his hand from Caroline's neck. He stared at her in disbelief, saying, "This is some kind of joke, a prank. It's not real. How could you be here telling me all this if they've taken out your heart?" "I don't know," she sobbed. "But I think I've made an awful mistake. You've got to help me. Promise you won't let them take me." "No, of course not. Where would they take you anyway? A hospital? It's an abandoned old church, Blackthorn Chapel. They want to take me there for the final ritual," Caroline said. "To complete the summoning of Valthus, they need to make an offering of the heart." "But aren't you supposed to be joining them? Becoming one of their coven? This sounds more like a sacrifice." "Yes, it does. They told me it was my initiation, but..." Caroline trailed off, turning to stare at the rain beating against the window. In a low whisper, she continued, "Now I'm not so sure. That's why I'm frightened." The blinding flash of light lit up the nearby window, and a deafening roar of thunder shook the house. A loud crash followed. Nearby, a car horn began sounding, repeating its alarm annoyingly. Hank leapt to his feet and crossed the room to look outside. Christ, that was close. The tree next door has split nearly in two. Some of its limbs have fallen over a few cars on the street. The lights inside the house flickered. Once, twice, and a third time before plunging them into darkness. "I'll get some candles," Hank said, cursing as he caught his toe on some piece of furniture. He fumbled his way to the kitchen. "Just need to find my phone so I can light the way." One more thunderclap boomed overhead. A sudden blast of wind swirled through the house. Footsteps pounded across the floor. Caroline shrieked, and there were sounds of a struggle from the other room. "No!" Caroline cried out. "I won't go! Hank, don't let them take me." Hank stumbled from the kitchen and could see down the hallway to the front door. It was swung wide open, and the wind and rain swept through in howling gusts. "Caroline?" Hank called out. He heard glass shattering all around him. The back of his head felt like an explosion had gone off, and the world tilted and shifted into slow motion. Hank sank to his knees. His vision was filled with a combination of swirling stars and inky blackness. The sounds of frantic struggle moved away from him as his hands slapped the carpeted floor. He struggled to breathe and clear his sight as he held himself from pitching forward onto his face. "Caroline!" he shouted. His head throbbed viciously, and he thought he might be sick. From outside, he heard car doors slamming, and a vehicle roared to life. He struggled to his feet and made it to the front door. Through the sheets of rain, he saw the burning glow of red tail lights receding down his street. Pursuit wasn't an easy option. The tree limbs, which had fallen over several cars, were blocking Hank's car as well. He slashed at them with a hatchet he had stowed in his camping gear. The rest of the fallen limbs tore at the side and undercarriage of Hank's car, but he managed to break free. He swore and cursed some more. The lousy cell service the storm had left him with made searching the internet difficult. After several minutes, he found directions to and a description of Blackthorn Chapel on a website promoting ghost walks in the city. Once a place of worship, the old chapel had fallen into disrepair, and the ground beneath was, so the locals claimed, cursed. It took nearly an hour to detour around storm debris and reroute past streets that had been rendered impassable before he arrived at his destination. If he'd paid the $50 for the Ghost Walk tour, Blackthorn Chapel would have rated 5 stars. It was surrounded by an overgrown and tangled hedge of blackthorn shrubs, buffeted by the wind and rain. The gnarled limbs seemed to claw at the twilit sky, as though grasping at something unseen. The crumbling stone walls were cracked and weathered. The roof was partially caved in, showing an outline of jagged edges that looked like the jaws of some wild beast snarling or snapping at the heavens. And the heavy wooden doors were worn and splintered and hanging slightly ajar on great rusted iron hinges. The jet-black gloom beyond the entrance seemed more of warning to sensible folk rather than an invitation to step inside. But if there was any chance, he might save Caroline. Inside was where Hank needed to be. He passed through an opening in the rough hedge, careful not to let the thorns sink their barbs into him. Walking in through the front entrance, he'd decided, would be courting failure. He might as well put his head through a noose. Instead, Hank crept around to the side of the run-down property, searching for another way into the chapel. Lightning lit the horizon several miles off. The brief flash revealed to him that he was creeping through a graveyard, which was part of the chapel grounds. Most of the headstones were crooked, sinking into the ground. Some had fallen or been knocked over. Many lay half-buried in tufted humps of wild grass. With a sense of dread, he picked his way carefully through the tangle of ancient stones and grass until he was out of the graveyard and could lean against the chapel wall. His heart was pounding as he panted silently, trying to catch his breath. Above the howling of the storm, a sound caught his ear. Soft at first, but regular, insistent. And coming from inside the chapel, Hank strained to make out what he was hearing. It was definitely chanting of some sort. Hank edged along the stone wall to the back of the crumbling old building. The ground sloped down, revealing the foundations of the chapel. He spotted a break in the wall and rushed to it. It was a narrow space, but large enough, he felt, to squeeze inside. Before he did so, Hank hefted the hatchet in his hand. He couldn't imagine actually using it to hack away at some unseen coven member. That would be slasher movie extreme. He twisted it around in his hand so that the square end faced out, becoming his weapon. He sucked in a few deep breaths, questioning his sanity. Then he scraped and squeezed his way through the narrow space. Feeling his way around in the dark, Hank discovered a series of long wooden boxes. Great, he thought. Could this night get any spookier? He'd found his way into the crypt. It took him a few minutes to pick his way around, but he eventually found a set of stairs leading to the proper part of the chapel. This was one of the cloisters, or side chapels. The chanting was more distinct. He could make out the words, "Valthus, Valthus, veil of night, drown the stars, consume the light from the maw, where silence dies. Open now your 1,000 eyes." He edged carefully toward a gap in the wall, which entered into the chapel's nave. There were broken pews scattered throughout the space, casting long shadows from the candles, which lit up the altar at the front. Shadow deep and shadow wide. Stretch the fold. Let worlds collide. What was whole? Let it decay. Let the void now have its way. He saw Carolyn, bound and gagged. She was wide-eyed and frantic, struggling to break free of her bonds. Unseen horror, whispered breath, we call you forth. We offer death. One by one, we fade. We kneel, take our names, unmake us real. A quick count revealed only 8 figures in hooded robes surrounding Caroline. He thought she'd said they were 12 in number. But this would be better odds. Hank hefted the hatchet in his hand one more time, feeling as confident as a person could ever be faced with such a scene. He took one step forward, but that was as far as he got. He was grasped from behind, his arms, legs, and even his torso in the grip of unseen talon-like hands. With swift force, they pulled him backwards, throwing him off balance. A ragged cloth was pressed over his nose and mouth. He struggled and tried to scream. Then blackness engulfed him. When he came to, Hank found he was now stretched out over the altar. His hands and feet were bound. Looking up, he could see eerie shadows playing across the vaulted arch above. "I'm sorry, Hank," Caroline said. "I had to do it." He snapped his head around in the direction of her voice and saw she was standing to his left. She held a long, curved dagger in her hands. The other coven members, all 12 of them now, were surrounding him. We needed a heart to complete my initiation and call down Valthus." He thought he'd known fear earlier in his pursuit of Caroline's attackers. Now, a choking sensation that felt like ice was spreading through his chest. In his head, Hank shouted Caroline's name, but the gag in his mouth prevented him from getting that or any other words that followed out. The coven members began to chant once more, "Valthus, Valthus, veil of night, drown the stars, consume the light." Lucid Dr. Mira Santos aligns her pen at a precise 90-degree angle to her notepad, then adjusts it to 89. Perfect precision matters. Her office presents an unbroken landscape of whites and grays, walls, furniture, even the spines of journals arranged by height on custom shelving. Her diplomas hang at measured intervals: Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins Fellowship, Stanford Neuropsychiatry. I keep having these dreams where pieces of myself are missing, Jamie Whitcomb explains, voice carrying an unsettling familiarity Mira can't place. Like someone tore pages from my story. She observes his hands as they animate his words. Index finger extended, thumb perpendicular. A gesture triggering a microsecond of déjà vu that she immediately classifies. Transient memory phenomenon. No clinical significance. Perhaps we could explore these gaps through guided imagery, she suggests, noting the clock. 2:37. I think my unconscious is getting tired of being ignored, Jamie says, meeting her eyes with unexpected directness. His fingers tap against his knee. Tap, tap, pause, tap. A rhythm that seems momentarily significant, then doesn't. You wrote something about this, actually. How the mind creates increasingly dramatic interventions when we persist in avoidance. Your work on trauma compartmentalization changed how I understand myself. Mira's hand pauses. Few patients research their therapists so thoroughly. She glances down and notices a blue smudge on her thumb that wasn't there moments ago. When not directly observed, it seems to shift slightly, like water finding its level. After Jamie leaves, she documents. Patient demonstrates unusual knowledge of practitioner's methodology. The words form in reassuring black ink. She categorizes the blue smudge. Stress-induced perceptual anomaly. Clinical terminology creates immediate distance. Safety through classification. Her calendar displays afternoon appointments, with a precise rectangle marked personal reflection at 2:30 each day. Time methodically scheduled for not thinking about what happened. 300 days of structured avoidance. She notices blue ink spreading in tomorrow's reflection block. Jamie Whitcomb, second consultation. She has no memory of scheduling this. Dr. Chen appears in her doorway. Mira, you've scheduled during your personal time tomorrow. The patient required accommodation. She lies with clinical detachment. You haven't adjusted that time block in almost a year, he observes, eyes lingering on her hand, where the blue smudge seems to pulse with her heartbeat. Her apartment mirrors her professional space, meticulously organized in whites and grays. She moves efficiently through rooms systematically purged of memory. Each belonging serves logical purpose. Control through environmental precision. Her path includes a mathematically precise 60-degree turn at the hallway's end. Gaze sliding past the single disruption in her colorless sanctuary. A cerulean blue door she hasn't opened in 300 days. For a heartbeat, vanilla shampoo scent registers. Small fingers sticky with breakfast syrup. A child's laughter, like wind chimes. Pulse accelerates. Tachycardia, 97 beats per minute. Respiratory rate increased 18%. Diagnosis: acute stress response. Treatment: continued avoidance. She walks past, careful not to touch the blue. Mira prepares for Jamie's second session, straightening her already straight pens. The blue stain has spread overnight, now covering her palm entirely. She tugs her sleeve lower. Patient demonstrates unusual knowledge of practitioner's methodology, she writes. Possible prior envy. She stops. The words appear in blue ink despite her black pen. She selects another. Same result. Equipment. Malfunction. Statistically improbable. Perceptual anomaly. Equally unlikely. Classification. Inconclusive. When Jamie enters, the room temperature drops 3 degrees. Calibration error, surely. The clock's second hand stutters. Tick. Pause. Tick, tick. Stretching moments unnaturally. Mira's breath forms small clouds that hover before dissipating. I researched you, she says, professional tone brittle. Your contact information leads nowhere. Perhaps I don't exist within your acceptable parameters, Jamie replies, something shifting behind his eyes. His features seem unstable today. A 30-something stranger one moment, then briefly showing contours of a younger face. Isn't that your specialty, Dr. Santos? Creating parameters that exclude what hurts too much? The air carries a faint antiseptic smell. Hospital corridors, grief-saturated waiting rooms. Olfactory hallucination. Unlikely, but not impossible. You've built your career helping others face what you avoid, Jamie says, fingers forming that distinctive gesture, index extended, thumb perpendicular. In your article, you wrote about integration, but your office calendar tells a different story. Her diploma wavers when not directly observed. Doctor of Medicine briefly becoming Mother Who Wasn't, before snapping back when she focuses on it. Do you believe in astronomy, Dr. Santos? Jamie asks, voice suddenly higher-pitched. That stars remember us even when clouds block our view? Even when we're gone? Mira's pen freezes. Mid-note. A child had asked her a nearly identical question once. Coincidence? Statistically impossible. We should focus on your experiences, she attempts, but her voice falters. Like you focus during your personal reflection blocks? His eyes shift color momentarily, from brown to startling blue. The time you carefully schedule for not remembering, the antiseptic smell intensifies. Her bookcase blurs at the edges, white shelves rippling like water, book spines dissolving into hospital corridor signs, small hand in hers, warm against her palm. Blue wool sweater with wooden buttons she'd helped fasten. Vanilla shampoo. Mira blinks rapidly. Classification: intrusive memory fragment. Treatment: compartmentalization. The clinical term disintegrates in her mind. You're diagnosing yourself in the third person, Jamie observes, his voice oscillating between adult articulation and childlike directness. Does Harvard teach doctors to hide inside words when feelings get too big? The pen in her hand turns liquid, blue ink flowing across her fingers in tiny rivulets that form star-like patterns on her skin. When Jamie leaves, or did he simply fade, Mira attempts to reorient. She aligns her pen perpendicular to her notepad, but blue ink pools beneath it, refusing containment. Dr. Chen enters, without knocking. The room temperature normalizes instantly, but blue stains remain across her notes, her desk, her hands. The Wilkins consultation, he says with unusual directness. They've requested another therapist. Said you seemed elsewhere. I maintained appropriate clinical distance, she recites. Like you maintain distance from the children's ward? His tone softens. 300 days, Mira. I saw you outside the memorial wall yesterday. He studies her, colleague and friend, visibly conflicted. Remember Elliot at the fundraiser concert? That Chopin nocturne we practiced for weeks? Him turning pages with that perfect timing? Chen's fingers mimic playing piano keys. When I asked how he knew exactly when, he said, "The music tells me," Mira finishes, throat constricting. It gets ready to need more space. Chen places a blue folder on her desk. You told Phillips to compartmentalize grief. That's not what you taught before. The patient was mirroring your strategy, Chen interrupts gently. Look at your hands. The blue has spread past her wrists. pulsing with her heartbeat. That night, the blue door PULSES with its own tuther. Mira arrives for Jamie's third session to find him already seated. Today, he wears a blue sweater with wooden buttons instead of his usual suit. Her office temperature has dropped 10 degrees overnight. Facility malfunction, she mutters, but her breath forms dense clouds. The second hand on her wall clock stutters. Tick, tick, stop, backward tick, then freezes at precisely 2:37. Your calendar has transformed, Jamie observes. Blue ink has spread across her appointment book, forming distinct patterns. The Big Dipper, Orion, constellations she once traced on a bedroom ceiling. Irregularity in the ink compu. The words disintegrate before she can complete them. Her diagnostic vocabulary suddenly foreign. Letters rearranging themselves, still trying to diagnose away what you feel? Jamie asks. His features shift. Adult one moment, then child's eyes, gazing from adult face, then small fingers emerging from suit sleeves. How's that working after 300 days? The antiseptic smell intensifies. Hospital-grade disinfectant, coffee from a nurse's station, vending machine cookies. Her cream walls ripple. Hospital corridor, green bleeding through, like watercolors on wet paper. Patient exhibits acute dissoc. She can't complete the word. The pen trembles between her fingers as blue ink pools on the page, forming tiny rivulets that flow toward her like seeking things. You taught me about grounding techniques, Jamie says, his voice shifting higher. The hand gesture again. Index extended, thumb perpendicular. When things feel overwhelming, find 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch. I never taught. Mira stops. She never met Jamie before 300 days ago. Statistical impossibility. Logical incongruence. Professional boundaries compromised. When things get scary, he continues. Features now unmistakably childlike beneath adult bone structure. Find something solid to hold on to, like your hand when we crossed parking lots. Her bookcase dissolves completely, revealing hospital waiting area chairs. The leather beneath her fingertips becomes vinyl, cold, sterile. A water cooler gurgles in the corner where her ficus plant had been moments before. The clock face melts, numbers flowing into blue puddles. Her diplomas rearrange into memorial service programs. This represents functional. Clinical terminology evaporates mid-thought. Her desk transforms into the hospital admitting counter, where she'd stood precisely 300 days ago, still hiding inside Harvard vocabulary. Jamie's adult clothing now hangs from a child's frame. Blue sweater with sleeves rolled 6 times, pants puddling around small sneakers. Elliot's face now fully visible, only his eyes retaining adult knowledge. Does categorizing grief really make it go away? VANILLASHAPOO. Apple detangler. Chocolate milk breath. This isn't Her hands convulse, sending her pen spinning across the floor. This cannot. The pen bleeds blue across linoleum, spreading toward her in tributary patterns that form exact replicas of the constellation drawings from Elliot's bedroom ceiling. Rain hammers against glass. Rhythmic squeak thump of wipers fighting deluge. Her phone vibrates against her ear. Dr. Chen's voice, tense with urgency. I understand this patient is in crisis, she hears herself say, but I'm driving with my son. Can I call you back in 5? Mommy? Elliot's voice from the back seat. Do stars remember us, even when we don't remember to look at them? A question deserving thoughtful response. Philosophical inquiry from a 5-year-old mind. Her eyes flick to the rearview mirror, his serious expression awaiting wisdom instead of to the road ahead. Her choice, her responsibility. Headlights through rain. Blinding. Impact. Metal screaming against metal. Her body thrown forward. Airbag deploying half-second too late. The silence after. You treat this like a case study in your textbook, Jamie Elliott says, now entirely child-sized, but speaking with impossible adult knowledge. Is that easier than admitting you chose the phone call over watching the road? The words DIETONATE inside her chest. Breath fracturing. Pulse arrhythmic. 300 days of defenses disintegrating. Post-traumatic stress with complete language fails completely. Her vocabulary, once armor against emotion, now meaningless sounds against memory's tide. Hospital corridor stretches infinitely before her. Antiseptic burning her nostrils. Time frozen at 2:37 a.m. The moment unchanged despite 300 days of scientific distance. 300 days of personal reflection spent deliberately not reflecting. She reaches for Jamie/Elliot, but her hands pass through his form, encountering only absence. Not hallucination, but memory materialized. I wasn't. The truth rises like floodwater, threatening to drown her. Clinical terminology evaporating. Harvard training useless against grief's undertow. I wasn't paying attention when it mattered most. Her hands shake uncontrollably. Blue ink flows across the floor, spreading from her pen, her notepad, her appointment book, all the places she's documented others' pain while refusing to acknowledge her own. My entire career, she whispers, helping others face what I couldn't bear to see. Mira finds herself kneeling on cold hospital tiles, forehead against sterile floor, professional identity dissolving in tears, suppressed for 300 days. I chose the phone call over watching the road. She confesses to emptiness, to absence, to irreversible consequence. The hospital corridor wavers, then dissolves. She's back in her office, familiar space rendered foreign by truth. Blue ink surrounds her, no longer threatening, but awaiting direction. Her diplomas, once sources of pride, now seem incomplete chapters in a larger story. She drives home through rain, no longer calculating statistical probabilities of hydroplaning, but feeling water against glass. Her clinical detachment, once armor, now recognized as barrier. Her hands on the steering wheel remember another rainy night, another drive, different outcome, same hands. Her apartment, meticulously controlled in whites and grays, appears through shifted perception. Not ordered, but empty. Not peaceful, but silent. 300 days of creating space that demanded nothing, remembered nothing, reflected nothing back to her. The hallway stretches before her. No more precise 60-degree turn. No more transient memory phenomenon diagnosis when vanilla scent registers. Tonight, she walks deliberately toward what she's avoided. The blue door pulses with its own heartbeat. Gentle rhythm, both inviting and terrifying. Blue light seeps beneath, casting underwater reflections across the floor. Her pulse accelerates. Tachycardia, 97 beats per minute. Old diagnostic habit. Same physical response. New understanding. She places her palm against the wood. Warm. Alive. An answering pressure, as if something, someone, presses back from beyond. I'm choosing to remember, she whispers, voice breaking, and turns the knob. Beyond isn't the sharp pain she feared, but a space where blues shift from midnight depth to dawn's gentle awakening. Stars hang suspended, constellations from a ceiling painted on a Saturday afternoon with small hands guiding hers. Not distant points, but presences casting soft illumination. The air carries forgotten scents. Vanilla shampoo, apple detangler, chocolate milk before bedtime. Piano notes drift through blue. Chopin Nocturne, 4 hands at different octaves. Laughter when they missed transitions. Elliot sits cross-legged beneath Draco, his favorite constellation, because dragons should get to live in the sky too. He wears the blue sweater with wooden buttons she'd helped him fasten that morning. When he looks up, his eyes hold both childlike wonder and impossible understanding. You finally came, he says simply. I was afraid, she answers, professional terminology inadequate for the ache in her chest. His small hand reaches for hers. Warm pressure, simultaneously present and preserved from before. I've been here the whole time, I'm sorry, she tells him, words carrying 300 days of avoided grief. I looked away when I should have been watching the road. He nods, serious expression, exactly as she'd seen in that final rear-view glance. You were helping somebody who needed you. That's what doctors do. Not more important than you, she whispers, voice raw. He considers this with child's directness. Maybe not more or less, just different. Like how we needed different sides of the piano bench to reach all the keys. She hadn't expected wisdom from loss, hadn't allowed possibility beyond absence. Remember when I asked about stars? He says, looking upward. If they remember us when clouds come, she nods, tears flowing without clinical categorization. They do, he says with certainty. Even when nobody's looking up, blue light pulses around them. Not invading, but connecting. Stars above and blue beneath, creating space between memory and presence, where healing begins. Your patients need you to remember too, he says, child's voice with unchildlike insight. Not just me, but what happened? She nods, understanding forming from fractured pieces. Not compartmentalization, but integration. Not absence, but transformation. Not forgetting, but carrying forward. I won't stop looking for you in the stars, she promises. His smile combines mischief with impossible wisdom. Even when you forget, I'll remember. That's what stars do. When Mira awakens, dried tears trace her cheeks. Her office has transformed. Pearl gray walls now carry blue undertones that shift with changing light. Harvard credentials hang beside a child's drawing of constellations labeled Me and Mommy's Star Map. The clock runs smoothly past 2:37, that moment acknowledged rather than avoided. On her desk sits a fountain pen filled with blue ink. Her deliberate choice now, not mysterious manifestation. Beside it, her appointment book with integration practice, replacing the blocks formerly labeled personal reflection. Not scheduled avoidance, but purposeful remembering. The phone rings. Dr. Chen about an urgent patient crisis. 300 days ago, she would have answered immediately. Today, she notes the time, 5:27 p.m. Elliot's astronomy club meets in her memory at 5:30. I'll call back in 20 minutes, she tells the receptionist. I have an important appointment first. She allows herself to remember for exactly 3 minutes. Blue sweater, constellation maps, questions about stars, before returning to professional responsibilities with renewed presence. Later that week, a new patient sits across from her, describing familiar patterns. After my daughter's accident, I created separate compartments, the woman explains, fingers tracing invisible boundaries on the armrest. Work Susan never mentions Emily. Mother Susan only exists on scheduled Sundays, when I permit myself to visit her room. Mira recognizes her former self in this careful division. 300 days ago, she would have praised this compartmentalization as adaptive coping. Standard protocol suggests emotional containment during grief responses. Mira pauses, feeling blue ink against her fingertips. She deliberately sets her manual aside. Protocols have their place, she says, leaning forward slightly. But they can't account for how grief rewrites our internal maps. Compartmentalizing doesn't actually protect us. It fragments us. Integration doesn't mean constant pain, but allowing memory to exist alongside present moment. The woman's eyes fill with tears. How? By acknowledging both your professional competence and your profound loss, not as separate identities, but as equally true aspects of who you are now. Later, Mira opens her own case file. She writes, "Subject demonstrates initial success in memory integration. Professional identity remains intact while accommodating emotional truth. Continued practice indicated." She pauses, then adds, "The stars remember us, even when we forget to look up." She signs the entry. Day 321. The blue ink catches light as it dries. Not the end of grief, but the beginning of carrying it differently. Lessons from my shadow dreams. It was storming. The sky a slab of slate with swollen thunderclouds crowding its expanse, each nudging for room. A wicked, unrelenting wind whipped chestnut hair into my eyes and mouth. Pulling it out of my face, I looked at the desolation surrounding me. Empty air met me in every direction. I don't know where I am, I realize, as the panic starts to set in, and my breathing turns shallow and rapid. On my hands and knees, kneeling on what appears to be sand made from stardust, I take a calming breath and rise until I'm standing. What is this place? Where am I? The last thing I remember is going to bed, my lids shutting to the lavender of my walls as I slowly drifted off to sleep. Not knowing what else to do, I started walking. And that's when the voices began, and the shadows formed. At first, it was small. It was subtle. A whisper here, a mutter there, voices that got louder as I trudged on. I struggled against the wind, hugging my arms to myself, each hand gripping an elbow until my knuckles turned white as chalk. As I walked, the black, star-lit sand at my feet began to rise with the wind, forming shadowy figures that strode alongside me, the overlapping voices tumbling from their open mouths. I watched in morbid fascination, my feet slowing as their dark forms became recognizable, their faces slowly morphing into a colorless version of the faces I know. On my right was my mother, a horrendous, nightmare version of my mother, her blue eyes dark as coal, and her face twisted with malice. "What are you doing? Really, Midge? Are you fucking stupid? What's wrong with you?" came from the cavern that was her mouth. My eyes went wide, fear and pain forming as tears that threatened to spill. "You're not good enough. Why would I want to touch you? You're not what I want," came from my left, and my head whipped to see an equally nightmarish version of my ex. At this point, my feet had slowed until I was almost at a complete stop. More and more figures from both my past and present began to form and dance around me, each hurling their own unique version of verbal awfulness. With each invisible blow, I shrunk until I was crouched on the shifting sand. Hands splayed over my face to cover sight and sound. I squeezed my eyes, silently begging for it to end, for the voices and noise and all the venom of the world to stop. "Midge, breakfast?" I gasped, jolting awake to my mom's voice calling from the kitchen. As reality settled in, a sick dread pooled in my gut at the vague nightmare I'd left behind. "It was a bad dream, Midge. Just a bad dream," I mumbled to myself as I rubbed the sleep from my eyes. I tramped downstairs, the thick soles of my boots making loud thuds on each carpet-covered step. I slid into a distressed wooden chair at our equally distressed dining table that doubled as our breakfast nook. As I shoved eggs in my mouth, scrambled just how my mom knows I like it, I thought about our history exam today with rising anxiety. I was not the best at memorizing details, like dates or times, and last night Amy had another drama round with her douche of a boyfriend. My mom sat across from me, early morning sunlight streaming in from the window sink, sipping coffee from the chipped Mom of the Year mug I got her for Christmas last year, before Dad left. Before it all fell apart, we sat together in silence. She analyzed me over her mug as I finished off my butter-soaked toast. "You okay, honey? You seem stressed," she asked with a slight tilt of her head. I nibbled my toast while staring at my plate, not wanting to admit how egregiously unprepared I was for the day's exam, or the nightmare I'd endured that clung to me like static. It felt like I was seeing reality underwater, my senses warbled and muffled, making everything as impactful as an echo. My mom cleared her throat, snapping me out of my reverie. "Midge?" she asked, her gaze holding concern as lines formed between her dark brows. "I'm okay, just not as ready for my exam today as I'd like to be," I answered simply. The truth was, I wasn't ready at all for anything. My mom pursed her lips and narrowed her eyes, a clear sign she knew I was lying. To be fair, technically, I really was worried about the exam today, but I also was still disturbed by my nightmare, which stuck to me like a dark, immovable shroud. and it being my parents' divorce anniversary didn't exactly help. As if sensing my thoughts, my mom's eyes darted to the calendar on our white linoleum fridge, absolutely covered with magnets and pamphlets or flyers. Instantly, her gaze softened when she recognized the date. "Hey, it's gonna be okay, baby. I know today will be hard, but you'll be okay. Plus, your father is still coming for a family dinner this Friday," she said with a quirk of her mouth, as if that should excite me, as if that fixed everything. I simply nodded as I tried to swallow my last bite of toast, which had turned to sandpaper in my throat. "Gotta go, Mom. Thanks for breakfast." Before she could answer, I quickly grabbed my backpack and was out the door. I sat in history, staring blankly at the open-ended questions in front of me. Mr. Sikowitz sat at his desk in the front of the class, hunched over papers he was likely grading for a different set of students, his red pen lightly roving and marking with steadfast eyes. I looked back down at the unanswered prompts in front of me and felt my heart start to quicken. Gods, I'm screwed. Dad would be so disappointed, I thought with increasing fear. My breathing became slightly uneven, and with the panic, my nightmare from the night before reached towards the front of my mind. This was the last thing I needed. But it seemed the more I tried to repress the images and the memory, the harder they fought back. Shadows began to gather at the edge of my vision. That same smoky, starlit sand from the dream clustering along my peripheral. I blinked hard 2 or 3 times while keeping my head down, trying to force this contorted melding out of existence through sheer denial. But to no avail. The darkness stayed. Slowly, and with threatening dread, the dregs of my nightmare creeped towards my desk until it surrounded me on every side. I briefly darted my eyes around the room, desperate to find some reaction, any recognition from my classmates of the nightmare unfolding. But I was left wanting. The line between dream and reality was paper thin, blurring further as the familiar wraith-like figures began to swirl upwards and form, then shattered entirely as my nightmare came to life. My mother was again on my right, with a mouth black as pitch and her blue eyes drained of color once more. "What makes you think you can do this, Midge? Answer me, Midge. What's wrong with you? Are you fucking stupid?" she hissed as her ghastly form drifted towards my ear, her teeth gnashing with each syllable. It wasn't exactly the same as the nightmare, but it was damn similar. Now my father, in his trademark suit and tie, took shape in front of me, causing me to flick my gaze upwards. Looking was a mistake. His usually coiffed hair laid limply on his head. His eyes were endless black holes, and he stood with his arms crossed, intimidating and unmovable despite his form. His slightly transparent clothes were rumpled and worn, which wasn't like him at all. And he looked at me with a face of disgust and hatred as I'd never known. At least, not from him. "Grow up, Midge. What's your problem? Why can't you just get this right?" he shouted, somehow slamming his not-so-solid hand on my desk, causing me to jump to my feet with a yelp, my chair making a loud crash as collateral. "Ms. Sloan, can I help you with something?" My head whipped over to Mr. Sikowitz, and just like that, as I met his dark brown eyes, the spell was broken. I looked around and realized that the echo of my nightmare had vanished, and all eyes were on me, as if deciding if they needed to grab the straitjacket now or later. I audibly swallowed. No, sorry, Mr. Sikowitz," I said, as I haphazardly righted my chair off the ground and sat while keeping my head and eyes firmly down, my dark hair creating a curtain on either side of my pallid face. The rest of the day passed in an anxiety-filled blur. At every turn and every corner, I looked for the shadows, waited for the starlit sand to reappear, and inch along the edge of my vision, anticipating the god-awful convergence of my nightmare and reality. But it never did. I stared out the bus window on the way home, watching the rain spatter the glass in large, heavy drops. "Hi, honey," my mom hollered from the kitchen when she heard me walk through the door, her voice warm and rich over the cold I felt in my bones, like a homespun blanket. Our house was a pretty open floor plan, with the kitchen slightly sectioned off, but having two large archways on either end of its L-shaped design. I watched her through this opening for a moment, trying to reconcile the nightmare version of her I saw at school with the flesh and blood in front of me. She was currently unloading the dishwasher, and when her hello was met with silence, she turned to look at me, her arm pausing briefly as she made to put away a plate. Her face scrunched, and she immediately put the dish on the counter. "What's wrong, honey? Did something happen at school?" I tried to speak. I tried to open my mouth to tell her about all of it, but nothing would come except tears that began to blur my vision. "Oh, honey," my mom said, as she strode over to me, crossing the distance in 3 or 4 strides due to her unfairly long legs. I let her hug me, soaked up the feeling of being wrapped in her arms, and for a solid couple of minutes, we stood in the entryway like that. I reveled in her warmth, the sensation of her solid arms around me, and memorized every detail that made her real, keeping contact with a hand on my shoulder. She guided me to the couch where we sat, knees angled towards each other. "Honey, what is it?" she asked, I looked at her, and at first, I could only stutter. As I struggled to form coherent words, I felt my anxiety and panic start to rise. The shadows were at the edge of my vision again, causing my breathing to turn rapid and shallow. "Honey?" my mom asked, leaning closer. I could barely hear her, barely see her over the pounding of my own heart. "Midge," my mom said, a bit louder now, giving my leg a slight shake as she placed her hand on my knee. The shadows and the darkness were beginning to take shape now. Starlit sand rolling across the ground as it crept ever closer. Tears pooled along my lids, causing my vision to blur. Suddenly, warm, soft hands enclosed my face, and my mom's face, my real mom's face, swam in front of me. "Midge," she seemed to say in almost a whisper. Look at me," she said, increasing the pressure around my head. "You are not broken, okay? I don't know exactly what you're seeing, but it's not real, okay? I'm real. I'm here," she said, taking the limp hand from my lap and gently placing it over her heart. I felt the softness of her wool sweater under my fingertips, like touching a cloud made of silk. I focused on her eyes, blue, just like they were supposed to be. "Your mom's, right here, Midge, right here. Not that ghoulish thing of nightmares," I thought to myself, as the vile shadow, puppeting as her, pushed and crowded closer along my peripheral. "That's it, baby. I'm right here. Breathe, honey. Breathe with me. Focus on my voice, on my face. I'm right here," she said with a squeeze of my fingers, as she had removed her hands from my head and was now holding my own in her lap, her gaze unwavering. I took a steadying breath. "Just breathe, Midge. That's all you have to do. Just breathe." I counted to 10 as I inhaled, and did the same on the exhale as my mom, keeping hold of my hands, did the same. "That's it, honey. Breathe. Just breathe. 10 in and 10 out. You can do this." I nodded, and as I expanded my lungs in and out, feeling my pulse start to slow, blessedly, the shadows began to ebb, receding from the edge of my vision. The grotesque, half-formed versions of my loved ones melting and fading away, bit by bit. By about the 5th or 6th of these exercises, the nightmare was all but gone, the shadows having slunk back to whatever hellish mindscape they belonged to. "There she is," my mom said with relief, seeing my eyes clear and the panic gone, a slight smile playing on her lips. I crumpled, burying my head into her chest with small sobs. "Oh, honey," she let out softly, stroking the top of my head as only a mom can. "Has this happened before?" she asked gently. I lied, shaking my head slightly as I kept it tucked into the crook of her arm. Gods, her sweater felt like the softest pillow. I soaked up the comfort. Do you know why your father left? I whipped my head up, pushing out of her arms, taken aback by the subject change. Realizing I wasn't going to answer her, she continued, but her face took on a faraway look, as if trying to see through the smog of time to the not-so-distant past. Our family, both the men and the women, have always struggled to master themselves. We have the curse of extreme feeling, of intangible emotions strong enough to drown countries. And for some of us, that leaks into our dreams. And then, sometimes, those dreams, usually the darkest of nightmares, leak into our reality. She shifted her focus back to me and asked with a tilt of her head, "Do you understand what I'm saying, Midge?" "No, not really," I mumbled, swallowing and tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. My mom leaned forward, using her thumbs to wipe away my residual tears, and took my hands in hers. "Honey, what were you feeling? What did you see?" she asked, her blue eyes piercing. I don't know," I said, avoiding her gaze. "I was sitting in class, trying to take my test, and, well, I wasn't sure of some answers. And then I was thinking about Dad, and I panicked. Then the nightmare started. But no one else could see it, just me." At this, I raised my head to look at her with wide eyes, searching for answers or preparing for a straitjacket, whichever came first. My mom pursed her lips, seeming to debate how much she should or shouldn't say. I saw the moment she decided to bear all, clear as day. "Honey, you were experiencing a moment of extreme emotion, of anxiety and fear, maybe panic. And sometimes those things can make us forget who we are, or even where we are. For the few in our family who have a very special heart, our emotions can cause our worst fears or worst anxieties to come to life. It usually takes an extreme or traumatic event. And given today's date," she trailed off, her eyes going distant again. After a moment, with a shake of her head, she returned her attention to me. She made to speak, but I stopped her before she could get a word out. "What happened with Dad?" I asked. My mom silently opened and closed her mouth, clearly struggling with what to say or how to say it. "When it happened to me while I was with your father, he thought I had gone half mad. Mine was a nightmare too, a wretched one that had me crouched in the corner like a rabid animal. Once we learned of our family history and what some of us have to deal with, he decided he didn't want to stay with someone who couldn't trust her own emotions, her own feelings, whose reality and dreams tended to mix and meld until they were one and the same. My mom's voice got progressively softer as she spoke, until it was barely above a mere whisper. "I'm so sorry, Mom," I said, taking hold of her hands and squeezing her palms. "That's all right, sweetie," she responded with a grimace, tucking another strand of chocolate brown hair behind my ear. "You know why?" Her eyes twinkled mischievously. My brow scrunched as I tried to find anything good in what had so far transpired, or what I'd been told. "Because," my mom said, clearly seeing I was coming up empty, "it's not just the bad dreams our hearts can bring to life." She smiled, placing a hand upon my cheek, rubbing small circles against my skin with her thumb. "It's the good ones, too." Witness to my own funeral. The darkness came first, then awareness. Not the gentle awakening from sleep, but a violent snap into consciousness, like a circuit suddenly completing. I existed, suspended in perfect blackness, my mind racing while my body lay still as carved stone. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I couldn't move. Yet I wasn't suffocating. Instead, I existed in a state of suspended animation, my consciousness trapped in an immobile shell. Voices filtered through the darkness, muffled at first, then gradually clearer. A somber baritone resonated above me. Russell Mercer was a man of passion and conviction. In his 47 years, he touched many lives with his generosity and spirit. My name, my age, my eulogy. Panic surged through my mind like an electrical storm, but my pulse remained undetectable. I was at my own funeral. The realization crystallized with horrifying clarity. I was presumed dead, yet fully, agonizingly aware. The air around me was heavy with the mingled scents of lilies and formaldehyde. The polished wood of what I now understood to be my coffin felt cold against my back, even through the suit I'd been dressed in. My final suit, chosen without my consent. He leaves behind his loving wife, Margaret, and his daughter, Emily, both of whom he cherished above all else. Margaret. Her face appeared in my mind, soft brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled, chestnut hair that caught the light, slender fingers that had touched my face just days ago. Or had it been longer? Time had become fluid, unreliable. I strained against my paralysis, willing just one finger to twitch, one eyelid to flutter. Nothing. My body remained a prison of flesh, unresponsive to my desperate commands. As the prayer ended, footsteps approached. The coffin creaked slightly as someone leaned over it. A drop of moisture, a tear, fell onto my cheek and slid down to my ear. I couldn't even flinch at the sensation. "Oh, Russell." Margaret's voice choked with emotion. I'll miss you so much." Her words should have comforted me. Instead, they sent a chill through my paralyzed form. Something in her tone, some subtle note beneath the grief, registered as wrong, like an instrument slightly out of tune, not enough for most to notice, but jarring to those who knew the true sound. Memory flickered like a faltering flame. The night before, what I thought was my death. Margaret bringing me a glass of whiskey. The unusual bitter aftertaste. The creeping numbness that had started in my fingertips and spread inward. My heartbeat slowing. Her face watching. Not with horror or concern, but with patience. The tranquil passage process is revolutionary, a professional voice explained above me. Dr. Howard, I presumed, the mortician from Serenity Gardens Memorial. The synthetic preservation compound allows natural death processes to conclude while preventing decomposition. The funeral home's specialization in this advanced method now seemed like cruel irony. I was trapped in the midpoint between mortality and preservation, held in stasis by chemicals that maintained my appearance, while my consciousness remained horrifyingly intact. "And you're certain he's gone?" Emily's voice. My daughter, 24 years old, analytical like me, suspicious of convenient truths. Even in my state, pride flickered within me at her questioning tone. Standard protocol requires a 24-hour waiting period before final sealing, Dr. Howard continued. It's mostly tradition, of course. We'll complete the preservation process tomorrow morning, 24 hours. A window of opportunity. That's thoughtful, Margaret remarked, her voice tight. Though I can't imagine why we'd need to wait. The scent of her perfume, vanilla and amber, drifted over me as she leaned closer to the coffin. I felt her fingers brush against mine, a feather-light touch that arranged my hands more perfectly over my chest. "The law requires it," Dr. Howard replied, his tone professionally neutral. "State regulations for the tranquil passage method are quite specific." I heard Margaret's slight intake of breath, so subtle that only someone who had shared a bed with her for 15 years would recognize it as frustration. The paralysis from the tetrodotoxin. I was certain now that's what she had used. Left me unable even to regulate my awareness. I couldn't sleep, couldn't drift into unconsciousness to escape this nightmare. I could only think, remember, and realize with growing horror what had happened. A door opened. The sound of high heels clicking against the floor grew louder, then stopped beside my coffin. "Russell," Margaret's voice, no longer performatively grief-stricken. "I need to make sure you understand why this is happening." Her fingertips traced the edge of the coffin, inches from my face. You never truly saw me, did you? Always focused on your own needs, your own desires. 15 years in your shadow, adjusting myself to fit your expectations. Her voice remained quiet, controlled. Did you know I started painting again last year? No, you didn't notice the studio I set up in the garage. Just like you didn't notice when I stopped loving you 3 years ago. Her words sliced through me more effectively than any scalpel. I hadn't noticed. I could have just left, she continued, her voice thoughtful. Divorce is so common, isn't it? But then I'd get half of everything at best. This way. She paused, and I could almost see her smile. This way, I get it all. The house, the investments, the insurance, a fresh start. The funny thing is, she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, no one will ever suspect. Your high blood pressure, your family history of heart problems, everyone saw this coming eventually, just not quite so soon. 24 hours, she murmured. Then it will be over. I'm sorry it has to be this way, Russell, but I've waited long enough for my life to begin. Time distorted in the coffin. Only the subtle changes in ambient sound gave me any sense of time's passage. The paralysis was absolute, yet paradoxically, I felt everything. The slight pressure of the coffin's padded interior, the unnatural stiffness of my starched collar. Most of all, I felt the crushing weight of Margaret's betrayal pressing against my chest more heavily than any physical constraint. The sound of the funeral home's front door opening interrupted my thoughts. Multiple footsteps approached my room. I just want to see him one more time. Emily's voice, tight with emotion. Before tomorrow. Of course, Miss Mercer. Take all the time you need. Dr. Howard's professional compassion. Dad. Emily's voice was closer now, directly above me. If only I could move. If only I could signal to her. My daughter, the one person who might question, who might look closely enough to see the truth. He doesn't look right, she said suddenly. I'm sorry? Dr. Howard's voice, confused. Something's off. His color. It's not like when someone's passed. Emily's voice grew firmer. And look at his eyes. The eyelids naturally settle in a slightly open position sometimes, Dr. Howard explained. We generally close them fully before the final preservation. No, it's not that. I swear they moved. My consciousness surged at her words. Yes, Emily. Look closer, Miss Mercer. Dr. Howard's voice was gentle but firm. I understand this is incredibly difficult. Many people experience these moments, seeing what they wish to see. I'm not imagining it, Emily insisted. Something's wrong. Dad had this thing about being buried alive. It was like a phobia for him. He made me promise I'd always check, always be sure. She was right. After reading Poe as a teenager, I'd developed an irrational fear of premature burial. The bitter irony of my current situation wasn't lost on me. I want another doctor to look at him. Emily's voice cracked slightly. Please, just to be sure. That would be unusual, Dr. Howard said carefully, but not impossible. However, we would need next of kin approval. That would be your mother. Then call her, Emily said. Call her right now. The sound of a phone being dialed. Rings echoed through the quiet room. Margaret Mercer. My wife's voice, slightly surprised. After brief explanations, Margaret's voice acquired a careful neutrality. Emily, she finally said, softly chiding. You're traumatized. We all are. But this isn't healthy. Mom, please. Dr. Howard, Margaret interrupted. Is there any medical reason to believe my husband isn't deceased? No, Mrs. Mercer. All standard protocols were followed. Then I think we need to accept reality and allow the grieving process to proceed naturally. The call ended. I felt a surge of desperate hope as Dr. Howard moved closer to the coffin. I'll perform a standard examination, he explained to Emily. I felt his cool, gloved fingers press against my neck, searching for a pulse that the tetrodotoxin had rendered imperceptible. He lifted one of my eyelids fully. The first change in my visual field since awakening in this nightmare. This was my chance. If any part of me could move, any minute twitch or dilation, now was the moment. Pupillary response is absent, Dr. Howard noted clinically. No sign of cardiovascular activity. No! I screamed within the prison of my mind. I'm here! I'm alive! Wait! Emily's voice was sharp. Do that again. Check his eyes again. Dr. Howard obliged, lifting my eyelid once more. I swear I saw something, Emily insisted. A tiny movement. There are certain substances that can create a death-like state, he said carefully. Extremely rare cases, but in my 40 years of practice, I've read about them. What are you saying? Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. Given your concerns and certain subtle anomalies I'm observing, I believe we should delay the final preservation process until we can conduct more thorough tests, just to be absolutely certain. In the stillness of my paralysis, a spark of hope flared to life. I was alone with Dr. Howard. After Emily left to make arrangements for additional tests, he had remained in the viewing room. Mr. Mercer, he finally said, his voice low and measured. If you can hear me, I want you to know that I suspect what might have happened to you. In my younger years, I worked briefly in Haiti, he continued. I witnessed cases there, substances that could induce states virtually indistinguishable from death. Tetrodotoxin is one such agent. Yes, my mind screamed. That's it. The door opened. The familiar sound of Margaret's heels approached. "Dr. Howard," she said, her voice carefully modulated, "I'd like a word." Their footsteps receded, leaving me alone once more. Minutes stretched endlessly until the door opened again. "I appreciate your understanding, Dr. Howard." Margaret's voice had regained its composure. Something in his tone had changed. The certainty, the suspicion from earlier, had been replaced by a strange formality. Dr. Howard's footsteps retreated, and the door closed, leaving me alone with my would-be murderer. "Well," Margaret said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "that was inconvenient. Your dutiful daughter nearly complicated things," she continued. "But fortunately, Dr. Howard is a practical man. When faced with the choice between pursuing an unlikely theory or accepting a generous donation to the funeral home's renovation fund, he made the sensible decision. Cold horror washed over me. She had bought his silence, his complicity. "The tests won't happen," she explained calmly. "Instead, they'll complete the preservation process tonight. A small adjustment to the schedule, that's all." Her perfume, once comforting, now sickening, enveloped me as she leaned closer. "This isn't just about money. This is about freedom. From your expectations, from your subtle control. The truth is, I've besaid for years in our marriage," she said. "Now it's just making official what's been true all along. One of us needed to go, and you always said you'd die for me. Now you get to keep that promise." Time passed, minutes or hours, I couldn't tell. The door opened again, and multiple sets of footsteps entered. "We'll begin the final preservation now," Dr. Howard's voice announced. "Mrs. Mercer has signed all the necessary authorizations." I felt hands positioning equipment near the coffin, heard the soft hiss of pressurized systems being prepared. "Begin the process," Dr. Howard instructed. I heard a mechanical sound, then the subtle hiss of gas being released into the coffin. The door burst open with a crash. "Stop!" Emily's voice, breathless and commanding. "Stop right now. Miss Mercer, your mother has..." "I don't care what she authorized," Emily interrupted fiercely. "I have a court order. This is highly unusual," Dr. Howard said, his voice tight. "Judge Harriman is a family friend," Emily explained, "and he takes potential medical malpractice very seriously. This emergency order requires independent verification before any further procedures. And I've brought someone who can help with that," Emily continued. "Dr. Langhorne from County General. She specializes in toxicology." "Dr. Howard," a new female voice greeted coolly. "I understand there's some question about this death certificate. I'd like to perform some tests immediately." I felt the preservation gas being shut off. Hands moved around me, unfastening something near the coffin's edge. "I'm drawing blood for immediate analysis," Dr. Langhorne explained. "And I'm administering a counteragent that will neutralize certain paralytic toxins if present." Something cold entered my veins. The sensation, the first active feeling beyond passive awareness since this nightmare began, was shockingly intense. Hands moved over me, clinical and thorough. Fingers pressed against my neck, lifted my eyelids, checked my reflexes. "Interesting," Dr. Langhorne murmured. "Very interesting." And then, a miracle. The slightest twitch in my index finger, imperceptible to anyone not watching for it, but to me, it was an earthquake, a revolution, a resurrection. "There!" Emily's voice, triumphant. "His finger moved. I saw it." "Indeed," Dr. Langhorne confirmed, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to get him to the hospital immediately. This man is not dead. He's been poisoned with a neurotoxin that mimics death." The room erupted into activity. I felt my body being lifted, transferred, moved with urgent care. "Someone should inform Mrs. Mercer," Dr. Howard suggested, his voice strained. "Oh, don't worry about that," Emily said, her voice carrying a hardness I'd never heard before. "The police are already speaking with her. They were very interested in the contents of her evening tea." "Her tea?" Dr. Langhorne asked. "Yes," Emily replied, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in her voice. "The one containing the same substance that nearly killed my father. The one I've been replacing with harmless herb tea for the past week, ever since I found her research on tetrodotoxin on her laptop." As they wheeled me toward the ambulance, I felt the paralysis receding further. A finger twitch became a hand flexing. An eyelid flickered. My lungs expanded slightly more with each breath. I was coming back from the dead. And Margaret was going to a cell. Justice, like life itself, sometimes hangs by the thinnest of threads. But when that thread holds, resurrection is possible. Santa, the hitman, the hospice smells like antiseptic and failed dreams. A Christmas-themed air freshener dangles from the IV stand, swaying in time with my father's mechanical wheezing. It smells like cinnamon and regret. The fluorescent lights hum, drowning out the morphine's slow drip. Hi, I'm the man who never amounted to anything. The trophyless disappointment. If life is a race, I'm the guy who tripped in the first 10 feet and never got back up. 35 years old, still renting, and my most significant contribution to society is a viral video of me accidentally setting fire to a microwave burrito. That's me, proud owner of a pile of unwashed dishes and a credit score so low it could run for public office. I sit slouched in this corner, watching my dad suck on life like it's a particularly stubborn milkshake. He's enormous. Round face, round belly, round everything. A human snowman, melted into a hospice bed. The kind of guy who built his whole life on being likable. For 30 years, he played Santa Claus at the mall. Not just any Santa, mind you. He was the Santa, the one people drove 4 counties over to see. His face still pops up on Christmas cards across the Midwest. A local legend, a walking, jolly Norman Rockwell painting. And me? I'm the guy who gave him a $10 Amazon gift card for Christmas. You'd think that's why he's dying. The look he gave me when he opened it. He beckons me closer, his hand shaking like a rusty wind-up toy. Come here, kiddo. Yeah, sure, I say, dragging the chair closer. It screeches against the linoleum, like its legs are fighting with the floor. What is it this time? Another story about how you single-handedly saved Christmas at the mall in '93. His laugh comes out like a wheeze caught in a blender. Then he stops, face turning deadly serious, eyes boring into mine. I've got a confession, kiddo. Something big. I lean back. Here we go again. Oh, great. Did you save Christmas again? He laughs, shakes his head. His smile, faint but still there, cracks like old plaster. No. Listen to me, kiddo. I killed people. I was a hitman. The words hit me like a sucker punch to the ribs. His eyes twinkle with something far from Christmas cheer. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Not because I believed him, but because some part of me wanted to. Like, even in death, Dad had to be bigger than life. Then the ridiculousness hit me, and I laughed. Hard. Too hard. Jesus, Dad. Did the morphine knock your last screw loose? You don't think a guy with fake snow in his eyebrows could carry out a clean kill? Do you? Dad's grin spreads like butter on burnt toast, his cheeks wobbling like he's auditioning for Jell-O's next ad campaign. I stare. Words feel stuck somewhere between my brain and my tongue, like traffic on the I-5 during rush hour. I've got a list of things I never expected to hear from my father. I love you. I'm proud of you. There's a secret trust fund hidden in the walls. But this takes the cake, and then assassinates the baker. You're messing with me, I finally manage. Is this one of those morphine fever dreams? Should I call the nurse? Blink once for yes. Dad coughs out a laugh, deep and phlegmy, shaking his head. No joke. I was good at it too. Seasonal work was the perfect cover. Everyone sees Santa as a big, harmless teddy bear. No one suspects Santa Claus of carrying a 9mm Glock. I blink. Hard. He's lost it. The man's gone off the deep end, dragged the Christmas tree, the reindeer, and the inflatable snowman with him. I had a code, he says, his voice dropping to a low rasp, like he's auditioning for The Godfather. Never moms, never kids. and no one who liked Christmas. I rub my temples. So you're telling me all those business trips to Reno weren't about fixing mall contracts? Nope. He pops the P like he's proud. They were about fixing people. Your old man was a regular Mr. Clean. And you expect me to believe this? He leans forward, a Herculean effort given his state. Remember the upstairs neighbor at our old place? The guy who played techno at 2 a.m.? I nod slowly, stomach sinking. You said he moved. I moved him. His grin widens. To a landfill. Permanently. You're not serious, I whisper, but my voice cracks. Oh God, he's serious. Go to my apartment and look for a box labeled Santa's Naughty List. Top shelf of my closet. See for yourself. I'm halfway to the door when the heart monitor gives up. The line going flat, like it's tired of pretending he had time left. Dad's apartment is a shrine to Christmas. Not the classy Pottery Barn kind of Christmas. This is the Walmart on clearance kind. Everywhere you look, there's a red and green assault on the senses. Tinsel dangles like garish cobwebs. A nutcracker army lines the windowsill, their paint chipped like they've been through a war. Fake snow dusts every surface, not sprinkled, but dumped, like he'd been trying to recreate a blizzard indoors. I kick a pile of it near the couch. It puffs up, glittering. The closet, though, that's where things get creepy. Rows of Santa suits hang in perfect order, sorted by decade. The 80s suits are polyester atrocities, faded red, like tomato soup, left in the sun. The newer ones are lush, rich velvets. There's even a Santa pimp cane leaning in the corner. Because, of course, there is. And the smell? That weird mothball meets candy cane funk. It clings to your clothes, gets in your hair. I'd need 3 showers and a priest to feel clean again. That's when I see it. A box on the top shelf, labeled in Sharpie, Santa's Naughty List. My stomach drops. No way that this is real. No way. The box creaks as I pull it down. Years of dust exploding in my face. Inside, the first thing I see is a pair of cracked glasses. Thick, Coke bottle lenses, scratched to hell, still smeared with something. A fingerprint, maybe, or worse. Intrigued, I pick them up gingerly, like they might bite. It had a Christmas gift tag hanging from it, reading, "The neighbor who played ABBA on repeat." Next, there's a gold wedding ring, heavy, engraved with "Forever Denise." This one has tag dangling from it that reads, "Hired by Denise to take care of her abusive, cheating husband." She gave me fresh baked cookies, still warm from the oven, too. The box bulged with trophies, Christmas tags swinging off them like tiny glittery alibis. At the bottom, a mall Santa hat, its white fur trim stiff and crusted with something dark brown. Blood? Hot chocolate? Both? My hand hovers over it, like touching. It might connect me to him, but I jerk back. My heart pounds in my ears. This is insane. This is nuts. This is impressive. Turns out, Dad wasn't just a professional at making kids smile. He was a professional at making people disappear. The thing about secrets is they're sticky. Once you hear one, it clings to you like gum on a shoe, no matter how much you scrape. Dad's confession isn't just sticking, it's metastasizing. The more I think about it, the more I see his life wasn't two separate halves. Santa and hitman, jolly old saint and silent assassin. It's all the same guy. And now, I'm the one holding the bag. He's dead. The town's favorite. Mall. Santa. Gone to that big workshop in the sky. Kids will cry when they hear. Some mom will bring them to the mall next week, hoping to see his stupid, twinkly eyes and hear his gravelly laugh. Instead, they'll get some substitute in a cheap suit, the kind who smells like whiskey and regret. That'll be Dad's legacy. A hole in the lives of every snot-nosed kid who sat on his lap, unless I tell the truth. If I do, it won't be crying kids. No. The whole town will lose its collective mind. Imagine this headline. Breaking news. Killer. Kringle caught dead. The local paper will have a field day. They'll dig up every photo of him, grinning in his red suit, surrounded by smiling children, and slap it next to words like murderer in bold block letters. The tabloids will pick it up. Every dumb podcaster with a microphone will start calling him the silent Santa Slayer. And me? I'll be the idiot who ruined Christmas for the whole town. The funeral smelled like peppermint and formaldehyde. Someone decided Dad's last ride should look like an after Christmas clearance aisle. Red and white draped the lid, as if trying to sugarcoat the whole thing. And of course, the mall workers showed up in elf hats, because nothing says, "We respect your dead father," like polyester and jingling bells. The service started with a speech from Jerry, the guy who managed the mall. Jerry had a voice like a dying accordion and the charisma of wet cardboard, but he tried. He wasn't just Santa, Jerry said, his words wobbling. He was Christmas. He saved Christmas. Saved it? Like he pulled Christmas from a burning building? You mean he sat in a chair for 8 hours a day while toddlers screamed in his face? Then came the slideshow. Dad with kids. Dad shaking hands. Dad eating cookies that probably came with handwritten death requests. And now it was my turn. I stepped up to the podium, clutching my notes. My palms were slick, my mouth dry. Every eyeball in the room locked onto me like I was the halftime show. Here lies Santa, the town legend, and here comes his loser kid. Fumbling for words, I cleared my throat. Dad was unforgettable, a safe start. Too safe. My hands shook. I glanced down at my notes, then up at the crowd. Their faces blurred. My brain buzzed because, my voice cracked. He was Santa. And a hitman. The room froze. A collective gasp sucked all the air out. Then Jerry laughed. The kind of laugh that makes you wonder if someone's choking. Santa? A hitman? More laughter erupted. Next, you'll tell us Rudolph ran a dip-fighting ring. I blinked. The crowd thought I was joking. Thank God, I faked a chuckle. The kind that burns your throat on the way out. Yeah, I guess he really killed it as Santa, huh? The groans at my pun covered my slip-up, and I pivoted. Hard. But seriously, Dad was the most unforgettable Santa this town ever had. They clapped. Some people wiped tears. And me? I stared at the casket, wondering what was worse, burying the truth with him, or walking around with it, lodged in my head forever. The funeral was barely over when he found me. Grizzled guy in a trench coat. The kind of face that looks like it's been carved out of driftwood. He shook my hand, his grip hard and dry, and said he knew my dad. Frankie, he said, like I should already know who he was. An old associate of your dad's. Associate? What kind of associate? Did Santa have a union? A reindeer mafia? Sorry for your loss, Frankie said, not sounding sorry at all. Your dad was a legend, one of the best in the biz. The biz? I asked, the words tasting like sewer milk. Frankie smirked, like I'd just failed some kind of test. He opened his trench coat, not for a gun, or a bomb, or a flashing incident, but for a business card. The font was a little too cheerful, a little too Comic Sans for what it said. Kringle and Associates. Holiday solutions for your problems. I stared at it like it might bite me. This is a joke, right? Frankie leaned in, breath heavy with something cheap and lethal. Your dad wasn't the only one, he said, his voice like gravel, rolled in honey. He pulled a candy cane from his pocket, twisting it between his fingers. Seasonal work. It's got its advantages. Keeps things clean. He paused, watching me, waiting, like there was something I was supposed to say. It's the perfect cover. Frankie smiled, teeth yellowed like a dog just pissed in the snow. He straightened up, sliding his hands into his coat. Your dad always said you'd make a great Santa. You've got the look. My dad spent my whole life teaching me things I didn't realize were lessons. How to lie with a smile. How to disappear in a crowd. How to keep secrets. I always thought he was preparing me for life, but maybe he was just preparing me for this. Frankie's words hung in the air like cigarette smoke, clinging to my skin. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Frankie tipped an imaginary hat and walked away, disappearing into the kind of fog that makes you doubt he was ever really there. I looked at the card again, the words staring back like a dare. Kringle and Associates. Dad always said to find a job that suits you. But some jobs find you. In the distance, I heard bells, maybe wind chimes, maybe the Salvation Army guy packing up. Who knows? What I do know is that I hate kids. I love cookies, and I could probably pull off the beard. Echoes in the dark. Michelle Byers woke to the hum of the oxygen machine and the sterile white glow of hospital lights. She had survived the crash. Her husband, Daniel, had not. They told her she had been unconscious for days, and in those days, the world had stolen her sense of normalcy. Recovery was grueling. Her body ached, but her mind suffered more. The doctors diagnosed her with narcolepsy, an after effect of the trauma. She struggled to distinguish wakefulness from the strange visions that plagued her. But nothing prepared her for what came next. Chapter 1. Fractured Pieces. The house felt empty without Daniel. Michelle moved through the rooms like a ghost herself, touching the furniture, the framed photographs, the tiny details of a life that had once been whole. Every object felt sacred, preserved in time, but also hollow without him. Then the strange things began happening. The first time, she thought she was imagining it. She walked into the kitchen one morning to find Daniel's favorite coffee mug on the counter. It wasn't just there. It was filled exactly as he would have made it. 3 sugars, 2 splashes of cream. She froze. Her breath came in quick, shallow bursts. She reached out with a trembling hand and touched the ceramic. It was warm. Did I do this? She whispered to herself. She had no recollection of making the coffee. She dumped it in the sink, trying to push away the nagging thought clawing at the back of her mind. That night, she checked Daniel's drawer, the one where she had placed his watch, his wedding ring, his last belongings. The watch was gone. She searched frantically. Through the drawers, through the entire bedroom, the nightstand, the closet. Nothing. Lack of sleep, she muttered. That's all this is. But then the voicemails started. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Past. One evening, as she walked into the living room, the red light on the answering machine blinked. It was an old relic, something Daniel had insisted on keeping despite her protests about just using their cell phones. She pressed play. "Hey, love. Just letting you know I'll be home late. Don't wait up." Her breath hitched. His voice, crisp and casual, like it always had been. Like he wasn't dead. Her legs buckled, and she collapsed onto the couch, pressing her hands to her mouth. She checked the timestamp. The message had been left yesterday. She deleted it. An error it had to be, but it happened again and again, every few nights. The same message, with slightly different wording. Sometimes it was just a simple, "Love you, see you soon." She played one for her friend Angela. Angela's face paled. "This is some sick joke. I swear I'm not making this up." Angela reached for her hand. "Michelle, this isn't healthy. Maybe it's your condition. Your doctor said hallucinations are possible with narcolepsy." Michelle recoiled. "You think I'm imagining this?" Angela hesitated. "I think grief can do strange things. And you haven't been sleeping." Michelle didn't argue. What was there to say? She made an appointment with her doctor, who prescribed sleeping pills to help regulate her sleep cycles. Chapter 3. The Stranger in the Coffee Shop. For weeks, the house was quiet. No misplaced objects, no strange messages. It was almost as if, by sleeping more, she had sealed whatever crack had let the past bleed into the present. Then she saw him. She was at a small cafe downtown, sipping on chamomile tea, staring blankly at her phone. It was an overcast afternoon, a steady drizzle coating the streets outside in shimmering gray. The bell over the door jingled, and a figure stepped inside. Her breath stopped in her throat. Daniel, sitting at a table near the window, laughing, his eyes crinkling in that way they always had. A woman sat across from him, stirring her coffee. Michelle's heart pounded as she stood, nearly knocking over her cup. She stumbled toward the door, her vision tunneling. Outside, the streets were a mess of honking cars, sloshing tires, and blurred figures. She tried to cross, barely noticing the screech of brakes and a driver shouting at her as she nearly stepped in front of a cab. By the time she made it to the other side, Daniel was gone. She pressed her hands to the cafe window, her breath fogging up the glass. No, 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 no. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone and called Angela. "He's alive," she gasped. "Angela, I swear to God, I just saw him." Angela's voice was strained. "Michelle, that's impossible. I saw him," she screamed, drawing the attention of pedestrians. She turned, scanning the street wildly. No sign of him. Chapter 4. The Cracks in Reality. When she got home, the silence of the house felt like it was pressing down on her. She sat on the couch, her hands gripping her knees. Had she really seen Daniel? Was she losing her grip on reality? As exhaustion pulled at her, she drifted into a restless sleep. And then a sound, footsteps, familiar, slow. Moving toward the bedroom, her heart pounded as she forced herself up. The house was dark, the air thick with something unspoken. She crept toward the bedroom, every step feeling heavier than the last. She pushed open the door. Nothing. Her breath came in ragged gobs. She turned on the light. The room was empty. Just her mind playing tricks again. She sat on the bed, tears burning her eyes. What's happening to me? Then her phone rang. She snatched it up, hands shaking. Mom? Honey? Her mother's voice was soft. I just wanted to check on you. I'm not okay, Michelle whispered. Mom, I saw him. I saw Daniel. Her mother hesitated. Michelle, you know we talked about this before. You and Daniel discussed his wishes in case something happened. You don't remember? A cold wave washed over her. No, we never had that conversation. Her mother sighed. And what about your trip to the lake house last summer? The one he planned? The words stuck in her throat. That never happened. Did it? Then she noticed something else. Her hands, they were different. The faint scar from childhood, gone. The calluses from her years of playing piano, missing. Her reflection in the bedroom mirror flickered for a second. An almost imperceptible glitch, as though the pixels themselves struggled to keep her image in place. Then the bedroom door creaked open. Footsteps, familiar, a shadow in the doorway. Michelle, the voice whispered. Her pulse stilled. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned and saw herself standing there, watching. The world cracked apart. Darkness swallowed her whole. When Michelle awoke, the room looked the same, but wrong. The pictures on the wall were slightly different. Her wedding photo with Daniel now showed them standing in front of a place they had never been. The color of the curtains had changed. Her phone no longer recognized her face. She stumbled to the bathroom, flicked on the light, and gasped. The reflection stared back with blank eyes. Her face, similar, yet unfamiliar. Sharper jaw, eyes a shade too light, skin too smooth. The scar on her collarbone from the skiing accident years ago was gone. A mechanical voice echoed faintly from her phone behind her. System error, biometric mismatch. Please verify user identity. She backed away from the mirror, from the glass that shimmered like liquid for half a second, as if the world was re-rendering itself in real time. She opened drawers, desperate for something familiar, something hers. But the clothes weren't hers. The books on her shelf bore her name as the author, only she'd never written them. The covers depicted surreal scenes, cities made of bone, people with stitched smiles, hollow-eyed children staring up at crimson moons. She ran outside. The street was there, but so quiet. The sky above was bruised purple, the clouds tinged with red. No birds, no wind. Every person she passed moved too slowly, their limbs jerky, robotic. They didn't blink, didn't speak, didn't see her. Michelle walked in a daze, her breath fogging in the warm air. The newsstand still had papers, but the headlines made her stomach twist. Temporal leak worsens. Memory replacements imminent. Global consciousness sync delayed. Users report phantom lives. Version control glitch detected. Subject 487. M. Byers. Flagged for recalibration. Subject? She turned to flee, but froze when she saw the cafe. The same cafe where she'd seen Daniel weeks ago. And there he was again, laughing, alive. Wrong. Sitting across from someone with her face. The other, Michelle, turned, and their eyes met. The world paused. A buzzing started low in her ears, rising to a high-pitched shriek. The people froze mid-step. The air shimmered. The other Michelle stood slowly and began to walk toward her. Michelle backed up, stumbling into a metal pole. A nearby screen flickered to life, displaying the symbol of an eye with fractals radiating outward. Then, a voice spoke from nowhere and everywhere. Welcome, Subject 487. Consciousness sync complete. Version displacement detected. Initiating purge. Michelle screamed, but there was no sound. Only light. And then oblivion. Epilogue. Static. In a bright white room with no doors, Michelle sits at a desk. Her hands type furiously on a keyboard that glows with symbols she doesn't recognize. On the wall, a screen shows surveillance feeds. Dozens of herselves navigating fractured realities. Some crying, some lost, some laughing beside Daniel. A door finally opens behind her. A figure enters. It's her again. This time, dressed in clinical white, clipboard in hand. Her eyes are cold, unblinking. Reset failed. Clipboard Michelle says. They always fight it. Desk Michelle whispers. They remember too much. Clipboard. Michelle tilts her head. Try a deeper extraction next time. Desk. Michelle nods, tears streaking down her face. Which one is the real me? The clipboard falls to the floor. No answer. The light flickers. The room glitches. And somewhere, in another version of reality, a woman named Michelle Byers wakes up again to the hum of an oxygen machine and the sterile white glow of hospital lights. Was it all a dream, or was this the dream? She doesn't know anymore, and maybe she never did. The funeral of Evelyn Warren. The chapel was too quiet. Grace sat in the front row, her hands tightly clenched in her lap. She couldn't stop staring at the closed casket, the weight of it pressing down on her chest. Her mother, Evelyn Warren, was supposed to be in there, gone. The whole world seemed to have shifted under her feet. But Grace couldn't fully accept it. Not when the last time she saw her mom, she was barely clinging to life in that hospital room. The pastor spoke about Evelyn's life, about her kindness, her strength, her love for her family. Grace barely heard him. Her mind kept drifting back to the hospital, the soft beeping of the machines, the moments of whispered conversation between her and the nurses. "She's not going to make it," they'd said, and everyone had gathered around, waiting for the inevitable. But how had they gotten it so wrong? How was she really gone? A door creaked open, faint, but loud enough to break the silence. Grace's eyes snapped up instinctively. The air in the room seemed to change, thickening with something she couldn't place. At first, it was just the soft sound of the door, but then she noticed people in the back of the chapel, turning their heads. It wasn't just the noise. There was something in the way the air shifted, something tense. Something didn't feel right. At first, Grace didn't see anyone. She just heard the door. But then, she caught a glimpse of a figure stepping through, standing still in the doorway. A woman. Her figure barely visible in the dim light. Grace's stomach dropped. The figure was too still, too stiff. She couldn't see her face, just the outline of someone standing there, looking almost out of place. But then the figure stepped forward. It was a woman wearing a simple dress, her hair falling loosely, almost wild, around her face. Grace's heart skipped a beat. There was something about the way the woman moved, about the way she stood there, her presence pulling every eye in the room toward her. Something in Grace's gut twisted. She knew that woman. She knew her all too well. Her breath caught in her throat. Grace stood up slowly, her legs shaking. The woman wasn't talking, wasn't even moving, just standing there. But it didn't matter. Grace's eyes were locked onto her, a strange panic flooding her chest. It was like something inside her was telling her this wasn't a mistake. "Mom," Grace whispered, the words barely leaving her mouth. But the woman didn't answer. She stood still, her eyes scanning the room. There was something about her, about the way she looked, like she was lost or confused. Grace couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed that it wasn't possible. She was just imagining things. But the figure, that woman, had to be her mom. Her voice trembled as she repeated the word. "Mom?" The woman blinked. Once, twice. She took a step forward, her gaze still unfocused. Grace took a hesitant step toward her, and then, slowly, the figure's eyes found Grace. They locked, and for a brief moment, the room fell completely silent. The woman's lips parted, but the words were slow, unsure. I'm not dead." The room seemed to hold its breath. Grace's mind was spinning. Her body was still frozen, a wave of confusion and disbelief washing over her. She wanted to ask a million questions, but no words came. The woman, Evelyn, took another step forward, her face pale, her expression distant, as if she were struggling to remember why she was here. "I didn't die," she whispered again, almost to herself, before her eyes finally met Grace's. "I'm not dead." Grace's mouth went dry. Her hands shook. Her mom, standing there, alive, and looking like she hadn't just been on the brink of death. It didn't make sense. She couldn't make sense of it. Not when she had just signed the papers hours ago. Not when she had seen the doctor shake his head. Not when the nurses had told her it was over. She took a step closer, her heart racing. "Mom? How are you? What's going on?" Evelyn's eyes were distant, like she was still trying to piece everything together. "I don't know, Grace," she said, her voice low, almost trembling. "I don't know. I was in the hospital, and then I woke up somewhere. I don't remember how or why. It doesn't make sense." Grace felt the floor beneath her shift. It wasn't just her confusion anymore. The whole room was holding its breath. The whispers around her, the people shifting in their seats. It all felt like the world was tilting, like something that should have been impossible was somehow here, in front of her. Her mother was here, alive, but no one knew why. A voice broke through the silence, sharp and incredulous. "What do you mean you woke up somewhere?" It was Mark, Evelyn's husband, standing at the back. His voice was trembling, but it was louder than the rest. "How could you just wake up? You were dead, Evelyn." Evelyn turned slowly toward him, her gaze steady but tired. "I don't know what they told you, Mark," she said, each word heavy. "I don't know what happened, but I'm not dead. I'm standing here. I'm alive." Mark shook his head, his face pale, his hands clenched by his sides. "This doesn't make sense. I saw them roll you out. I saw them." His voice broke for a moment. "I thought we were done. I thought I was burying you today." People exchanged uncertain looks, some beginning to stand, others shrinking back into their seats. Everything had been turned upside down in an instant. Grace's mind was racing. "But the hospital, the machines, Her voice faltered, as if the words themselves were too heavy. "I was there, Mom. I saw you. I told you I loved you. She couldn't finish. The memory of her mom lying there, so fragile, barely clinging to life, was still too fresh. It didn't make sense. How could she be standing here now? So normal. Evelyn stepped closer, but there was no comfort in it. She wasn't the same Evelyn that Grace had known. She seemed distant, even when she stood right in front of her. It was like she was here physically, but her presence was off. She looked like someone trying to remember who they used to be. "I don't know why they told you that," Evelyn said softly. "I don't know what happened, but I swear to you, Grace, I wasn't dead. I didn't die, but we were all told you were gone," Grace whispered, her voice cracking. "Why didn't you come to us?" "I couldn't, Grace. I don't know what happened, but I couldn't remember how to get back. Everything felt so strange, like I was still in the hospital, like I wasn't allowed to leave." Grace couldn't breathe. None of this was making sense. "I need answers," Mark said, taking a few quick steps toward Evelyn, his face twisted with disbelief. "You don't just get to show up after we've all mourned you, after we've buried you, and say you're fine. I heard them tell me you were gone." His voice was sharp, raw. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" "I'm not joking, Mark," Evelyn said, her tone suddenly hard, but there was a weariness behind it. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm not here to confuse you. I'm just telling you the truth. I don't know what happened, but I'm not dead." The room was silent again, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Grace wanted to scream, to shake her mom and demand answers, but she could only stand there, frozen. The casket behind her, her mother's casket, was a cruel reminder of everything that was supposed to be real, of everything that wasn't. "Maybe you should sit down," someone whispered from the back. Grace couldn't tell who it was. Evelyn's eyes flickered around the room, scanning the faces. And for the first time since she entered, she seemed to register how many people were watching. Some were looking at her in disbelief, others in fear, unsure of whether they should approach or retreat. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," Evelyn repeated, her voice quieter now, though there was something like sorrow in her tone. "But I can't explain this. I don't understand it. I don't understand how I'm standing here, either. I don't understand any of this." Grace felt tears threaten to spill, but she fought them back. The world was too heavy. It felt like her brain couldn't catch up with what was happening. The way her mother looked, alive, but not the same, was like a dream, like something she'd imagined in her worst nightmare. And yet, here she was, in front of them, breathing, standing, alive. "I'm sorry," Evelyn said, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I don't know what happened, but I'm here now." Grace, standing there, couldn't shake the feeling that the answers weren't going to come easy. And maybe they never would.